history of the portrayal of incarceration in TV and film?
In short, stereotypes and reductionism. But there's, I think, a lot of error to that. If you go far enough back, and actually you pointed this out, in times of political conflict, such as was the case in the 30s and 40s, you see really hyper stereotypes like Birth of a Nation or Reefer Madness. I think many people are familiar with that. And it wasn't necessarily incarceration, but the justice system right there that was really, you know, hyper-violent, hyper-sexualized, out of control, crazy, all of these things that have been stereotypes throughout time. But then in quieter times, you actually got to lay more, before mass incarceration, a bit of a disregard for the actual incarceration. Like, I remember watching reruns of the Andy Griffith Show and Mayberry at night. There's just a person that was in the cell and they were totally normal and reasonable, and it wasn't really, there wasn't a lot to it. It was just there, just like life has. Some people are incarcerated for moments, and especially at that time, it usually wasn't that long. But then you get to this time period, I think starting in the 80s, and with the advent of the explosion of cable TV and the opportunity for a lot of profit and the need for viewers, but also the political reality of mass incarceration had begun. And so there was Willie Horton. I think a lot of people are familiar with that. And then at that point, incarceration with shows, I would say, starts with Cops, if anybody remembers Cops. And then into fictionalized TV that, like Law and Order, that was supposed to depict reality, but any incarceration depicted in that, the cops would just walk in and sit in somebody's cell with them, like on a whim. Like, this, none of this is real. But what always happened with the system in general, and the incarceration especially, it was part of, this is where we've got all of this crazy things happening in society. And at the end of that, this person goes away, they continue to be crazy, they're violent, they're sexual, all of these stereotypes, especially racialized stereotypes, were depicted as the reality of the system, even if they weren't. And then I think you get to a even more sensationalized entertainment version, which I think of as Oz, beginning with Oz. And that was like, all right, we're gonna take this, they were depicting it as the reality of the system before, now we're gonna take those things that were really triggering people and put them out there as just for entertainment purpose. Look, I did a dime, and not one moment was anything like Oz. That shit was crazy, right? Like, even, I mean, and so that was something that began then, so this sensationalized entertainment, and I think of also Sons of Anarchy, which didn't take place in prison, but a lot of it did, but it was very sensationalized what they depicted in those settings. And then I think you get to the point where your campaign is really focused after that, this era of sensationalized realism, where you're presenting this as actually being real life, which it simply is not. If you take weeks of filming any group of people, especially people in crisis and trauma, and then distill it down, it's going to make them look insane and like they need to be separated from society. And so that has been a perpetuation and reinforcement of these stereotypes, and we'll talk, I'm sure, more about that, but I think that that's the era we find ourselves in now. It's taking these previous stereotypes and now depicting them in a way that reinforces them as reality, even if they're not realistic.
Great answer there. Thank you so much for that whole, this is the sign where you're talking with the college professor right here. He's got the whole breadth, and I really appreciate it. I had not thought of taking this all the way back to early cinema. So that's fascinating. And now, Vidal, we just saw the video intro to your organization. It reaches out to what you all are doing. What got you involved in this space?
So first of all, thank you for having me. My name is Vidal Guzman. Go pronoun he, him. I think for me, like, I'm formerly incarcerated. 14 years of, I'm 33, 14 years of my life in this, on this planet was inside of jail, prison, parole, gang parole, probation. So majority of my time, you know, I was also tried as an adult when I was 16. I was facing 15 years when I was 16 years old. At a time when New York tried kids as adults, and I will always put that this person's names out there, Khalif Browder. is a story that we all should remember and should learn about, because this was one of the individuals who was innocent and was incarcerated for 3 years in Rikers Island, a jail in New York City, for stealing a book bag, and realistically he was innocent. And the reason why I put his story out there is because for me, like, I learned this quote, like, Rikers, you know, you leave Rikers Island, that doesn't mean Rikers left you. Just because you left the system doesn't mean the system left you. And for me, coming home it's about to make 10 years now, I just needed to figure out what I was good at, right? You're returning back to society, and one of the things I got active with was with formerly incarcerated individuals coming home, being active. And the first campaign I got active with was the Close Rikers campaign. And Donna's here. Donna was a part of it, still a part of that campaign. And it taught me about narrative change. I was a community organizer. I was talking to communities, the 7 communities that impacts mass incarceration in New York. There was a study that was done by the Green Haven think tanks trying to figure out where exactly zip codes were people coming home from or being incarcerated from. So for me, like, it was being exposed to the injustice, being a part of campaigns. As I said before, the Close Rikers campaign, raise the age and qualify immunity. And when I got active, I said, yo, I need to do more, I need to do more. And I launched my organization called Marathon Trial, you know, as a 501c3, 2.5 years. It's been out since 2020. But when we first launched the AIRS campaign, we wanted to figure out, what are people saying about Incarcerated Reality Show? How does it impact everybody? And we started talking to directly impacted people around the country, internationally, around reality shows. And the more we started learning, example, on 60 Days In, you heard Lucky Chucky, he's from Illinois, he was also on 60 Days In. We learned that just to make an episode of 60 Days In is $375K. And since 60 Days has been out, is now making 9 seasons, it made $50 million. And if you ask me how many or how much money did a person incarcerated make, or any incarcerated people did, 0. Our goal was to look at the system as is, hold it accountable, and get other individual organizations and directly impacted people to say, your story is getting derailed, your story is getting used for entertainment, and people are willing to make money off your back while you don't make nothing. So for us at the AIRS campaign, we are been organizing film writers, directly impacted people. We have members and supporters in 29 states. We blew up really quick because people know what's wrong and right. And seeing reality shows like these, I asked myself, how much have they made? Since the 1980s, reality shows have been released. This is $1 billion economy without any incarcerated people getting paid for their time, and that's wrong. And if they can go inside a facility and use incarcerated people for free settings, use incarcerated people for free labor, there's a problem in our hands that we need to make sure we hold these people accountable.
I think you make a really good point there, just on the monetary basis, where you had this $1 billion industry and, for lack of a better word, the actors aren't receiving any benefit from that. Taj, I want to take that a little bit of a different direction now. Besides the monetary impact, what are some of the real-world impacts of the way incarceration is portrayed in film and TV?
I'm going to get to that in just 1 second, because I want to follow up on something Vidal said. So, that is no different than the phones, or the commissary, or every other, or private prisons overall, or the medical services. When you privatize anything about this and create profit, it only encourages more mass incarceration, right? Ultimately, you have created an incentive, a $1 billion incentive, to keep people in this situation, right? So I'm just going to say that is one of the consequences that relates back. Also, before I go on to a slightly different track of that, I also just want to say this panel has the best footwear. Go ahead, Vidal, show them. Of any panel I've ever been on.
I feel woefully underrepresented right now.
So anyway, so the real world consequences of all of this, besides what I already mentioned, I think the biggest thing is this becomes the understood reality culture-wide. Social constructionism, that's a sociological term for we understand things that we do not experience through what we experience socially about them. And the further removed we are from those things in our lived experience, the more we rely on the narratives that come to us, and narrative formats are specifically found to have been more persuasive in convincing people about what the reality is. So when it's on TV or film, and people have not experienced incarceration, or even our loved ones who know us and only get this on their viewing, even their understandings are impacted by this. So it constructs our understood collective reality in the first place, and in a way that specifically is dehumanizing and reductionist. It turns all of our humanity into the fact of our incarceration, right? Or whatever the situation might be, it turns everything into the crime. And when all of those historical situations of racism and hypersexualization and all of these things are depicted in incarceration, it now constructs the reality that the world assumes that that's how anybody who going to prison is. And when it shows people in prison acting that way, especially when it's cherry-picked and literally prompted on these reality shows, like they'll write on a board, do this, and then they will encourage people to do the things that will drive viewership, it then suggests in our creative collective reality that, oh yeah, people that are there must deserve to be there. And so I'll say the real world consequences beyond that dehumanization are three particular things. One, it creates fear, right? When you show these shows and about either the justice system in general or incarceration, they show things that do not happen most places most of the time, as if they're the thing that is always happening to everybody who's never been involved in anything except being a good person in their life. That creates unrealistic fear in our society, and to the point that every year, since 1993 until about 2016, the crime rate in America was dropping. And every single year, the majority of people thought it was going up. That alone means you've created a problem, right? There is going to now be policy divorced from reality. And so I'll say that's another real world consequence, is it reinforces the status quo when we depict things this way and construct a reality around it, right? It reinforces the idea, one, that this is normal, that this is how the system is and how the people who inhabit the system actually are. They are not fathers and mothers, sisters and brothers, poets and artists, and all of these things, and especially parents, besides whatever that moment was. They are just these things. And it makes it normal to have them locked up. It is now the constructed reality. And then on top of that, it suggests to people that this is a need for things to be this way, because look at how these people are being. But they're not even people in these eyes, right? So it actually resists the reform that we're all here to try to get when you construct a reality of this. Because everybody who's voting, and hence politicians, are going to have this reality and think that policy needs to reflect all of these stereotyping, fear-mongering realities. And I would say it also really has an impact on our experience coming home. Because that is now what anybody, if you say, I've been locked up, this is what people associate with you.
Thank you for that. And I think that's really important about how we see that this is impacting not just the way people see things, but the policy that is then made that impacts everyone who is incarcerated or even formerly incarcerated. So, Vidal, thinking about this, in your ideal world, how would incarceration and its impacts be portrayed in film and TV?
So I'm gonna do one of you and just say, like, before we even get to that question, is that 60 Days In is shown in 100 different countries. 100 different countries. And we know majority of people who are incarcerated are black and brown. So somebody can just turn on an app and just start watching from wherever, and that's their thinking about where mass incarceration is. And it's false. 1.5 million viewers in some way are tapping in 60 Days In. 1.5. So overall, there is an issue that is happening around the country that people are watching. They're trying to learn about mass incarceration from the wrong people. The world that I want to see and the world we should see collectively and what the campaign want to see, is a place where we see ourselves in the true form. Our stories matter. Our ability to return back to society matters. Our abilities to tell people our real struggles matter. I talk to families all the time when we do tabling, when we do outreaching to communities, and the first thing people say, I watched it, it was horrible. Just don't talk about what's the struggle of me going to go see my son who's 7-8 hours away. It doesn't talk about the struggle of trying to keep up paying rent and also send my kid commissary money. It doesn't talk about the struggle that I just learned that my son or my daughter or they and them are in solitary confinement and I can't interact with them. It doesn't talk about, there's so many issues in the world we want to see. Is that TV and production network, we got to do the inside-outside game. So the inside game, we got to make sure whatever TV network is releasing reality show, we need to be in those tables to make sure that if you are releasing any type of reality show, it has to make sure that it's not derailing our movement. I have to truthfully say this. Incarcerated people deserve minimum wage. If they're going to be featured in reality show that is aligned with our talking points, aligned with our messages, they need to get paid. That means is it a 50% where they use 50% of their money while they're still inside and 50% when they come home? Let's do that. And if TV and production networks are using these reality shows to create violence, they need to cough up and donate some money to start addressing some of the harm they did. Yeah. And that we have to do that. And the most important part is if TV and production networks are releasing these reality shows and they know it's harming the public, they know that it is, we looked at our data, 18 to 45 year olds are the age bracket who are watching 60 Days In. But it doesn't talk about, are they black, are they white, are they brown? The only data we was able to find out was, more on the race-wise, was Love at the Lockup. And found out the majority of them are black and African-American women. But the question I asked, again, this takes advantage, Love at the Lockup, it takes advantage of family members at their most crucial, not having resources next to them. And what we're also saying, like TV and production network, if y'all coming out with any reality show, these counseling needs to be involved in this space. Mental health needs to be involved in this space. And majority, most important, jobs. You just can't have somebody on TV saying, I can't pay for this, I can't pay for that, and y'all not giving me enough money. No, we need to hold them accountable.
Thank you, that's wonderfully said. We need to start wrapping up this panel now, and I want to leave you guys with one last question, because both of these guys have their organizations. Humanization Project airs, you can get connected with them over there in the community partner section, you can follow up with them after the festival is over, and I really encourage you guys to do that. But what is it that you want this audience to take away from today as we're thinking about incarceration and how it's portrayed in media?
I think everybody should engage their campaign as a starting point because they're actively working on this and we don't all need to reinvent the wheel. We need to be part of those movements that have some momentum and strengthen them so that they get the results they need. So I would say start there. Engage the AIRS campaign and let's find ways to bring it to Virginia. There's potentially legislative action there. I'm sure that there's strategies we could have to create those systems of accountability and recompense that we've been talking about. But I also think when you're encountering somebody that watches one of these things, just ask them questions. Don't tell them you're stupid for watching it because you're not going to get anywhere after that. But ask them questions. So, have you thought about this? Or what do you think that person's family's like? Or how do you think that person, ask questions that beget conversation that challenge these assumptions of this being reality. And always present three-dimensional. All of us are more than our worst moments, right? All of us, whether we've been incarcerated or not. And what this is this is a depiction of all of our worst moments as a defining characteristic of, the only characteristic of who we are. So I would say in any situation, especially when it involves incarceration, bring up a conversation that is on the human three-dimensional level.
Everything that he says, We're over there, you know, like if you have organizations, we are looking for other organizations to sign to the campaign. If you are someone who's directly impacted, please sign up to our newsletter. If, again, you know somebody who watches these shows, have the conversation with them. It doesn't take too much for you to do one thing. When you see shows like this, just turn it off. It's the power of using our buttons and our hands, turning it off, and being vocal about what we want to see and what type of world we want to be in. And the last thing I say is that our stories matter. Like, nobody can take our story away from us. And we need to make sure that TV and production networks are not continuing to do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vidal. Thanks so much, Taj. And I do